Welcome back to the RV. On behalf of ArabNet, we're doing an awesome interview right now with someone who I've been connected to for a while, and who is I don't even know if I call it evangelist, but someone who's already connected to the Middle East. Leslie Jump. I don't know, like, there's so many things that you're involved with. Startup Weekend, Sawari Ventures in the Middle East. You're on the board of Kinjin, PITME, good friend of mine. And every time I hear about your name from somebody else, like, there's another thing. And so I don't know how you managed to do this, but I want to thank you for making the time and joining us here.
Thank you for having me.
It's an honor to finally meet you in person. And so tell us a little bit, who's Leslie, and what's your special connection to the Middle East, and and then maybe a couple thoughts on South by.
Well, sure. So my special connection to the Middle East is I fell in love with an American diplomat 2 weeks after 9/11. Yeah, it's one of the great ironies of life, right? This horrible thing happened, but for me, a tremendous outcome was that I met him. And so when he first took me to the region, we first went to Cairo together. I fell in love with the Middle East. But I was also stunned and struck by how difficult it was for small businesses to capitalize, that there was all this talent out there that was just really underutilized. And so I thought, well, there's got to be something I can do with that. So I've been in the technology industry and started down the path of finding partners and starting a venture capital fund there.
So then how did you actually meet Alfie? Because Alfie, to me, is one of the very few people in the Middle East who gets it, who's no fluff. Best piece of advice I've ever gotten from anybody in the Middle East was Alfie telling me that he does not waste his time with people who waste his time, and that I should remember that. And along the way, that was a hard lesson to learn. But Alfie is just a straight shooter, and he's got this incubator with Flat 6. Hytham, again, is to me like a prodigy that's come out of that. He's built something amazing, a better Wolfram Alpha that could power Siri and stuff. So, but how did you connect with Alfie in the beginning, and what are you guys up to now?
Sure. So I was listening to your other interviewer's story. Ours was sort of similar in terms of disruptions happening. So we came together as a team because our third partner, Hani Al-Sambadi, was at EFG Hermes prior to everything going on in Egypt, and so he had worked with Alfie, who was also there briefly, and that was kind of how the three of us came together. We all wanted to start what looked and felt like an early stage investment firm in the Middle East, but really tuned to what the entrepreneurs in that region need. So we because of my connections with the State Department, with my husband's, they had just announced the Global Entrepreneurship Program. President Obama, as you may recall, went to Cairo and made a wonderful speech in 2009. So they said, well, look, we're going to launch in Egypt. Can you guys help us out with this and organize a trip for investors to go to Egypt? Faisal Sahel was on that, and a whole bunch of other investors. It's where we had a business plan competition, and Haytham was one of the two winners. So anyway, as it turned out, that all happened the week Ben Ali was ousted from Tunisia.
Crazy.
So try announcing a venture capital fund and then having a revolution start in the country the following week. It's one of those extraordinary kind of things. And Alfie and Hani have been brilliant, in terms of what they chose to focus on, and when, you realize how much the ground is moving around you. But you also realize that the needs of the entrepreneurs are still the same. I mean, they may have some additional challenges that you weren't planning on before, but if they're great entrepreneurs, they'll figure out how to deal with them, they'll pivot, they'll do what they need to do.
And the program in Cairo, Flat 6, is definitely one of the best ones I've come across in the Middle East, and Ramos, who runs it, is
phenomenal.
Awesome, super cool guy. And I don't know, every time I go, I've met so many of the entrepreneurs. I've gone to a couple of the demo days. It's really inspiring to me that there's all this noise and revolution and unrest going on, and still these entrepreneurs are plugging away and building super
great
cool,
stuff.
Great stuff that really is disruptive and
world class.
World class, exactly. So that actually was a really kind of a brush of fresh air for me to see that's going on while all this other things are going on. Really quickly, so you're also on the board of Startup Weekend, which I've judged a few of them in the Middle East. I don't know if you know the story. So Mark and I met cattle herding a couple years ago.
You were cattle herding, you mean? That wasn't a startup.
No. Okay. We actually met through Francisco Dow, and we met cattle herding. So, and then Keith, who's now working with Steve Blank on Next. Him and I connected in Beirut, and he was running the Middle East Startup Weekend, and I can tell you, Startup Weekend as a whole, even when I was a finance dude, I always thought it's like one of the biggest sparks to kind of get things going. But for some reason, especially in the Middle East, amazing. So I'll tell you a really quick story. So I'm at Startup Weekend in Dubai. 400 people had signed up, 67 teams were formed, and I ended up doing 20-minute office hours sessions in a tent, and literally met, you know, all these amazing entrepreneurs, especially women that were super motivated and passionate. But, you know, there are 20 startup weekends happening in the next 6 months in the Middle East. Tehran just had its first.
Yep, that's right.
And I can literally, it almost brought tears to my eyes to think that in a country that's completely disconnected from the rest of the world, they're entrepreneurs. And Clint actually told me that it was one of the most well supported and best executed ones in the entire region. So really proud, and obviously it must be an honor to be part of that.
Absolutely. They're a phenomenal organization. We first started working together on Middle East stuff, but then we kind of realized that there was they have grown exponentially, and they're going to continue to. I mean, as of the end of last year, 100,000 people had participated in their events in 110 countries, and they really just got started a couple of years ago. And what's great about it, and what they've done so well, I think, is it's a total grassroots organization. So they've got 3,000 volunteers worldwide, and we're hoping to double every year. And so obviously the majority of the activity happens outside the United States, and so that's why they wanted somebody with a focus and an expertise in international to be able to help them think about it. But yeah, it's really exciting to see. And I mean, you know, entrepreneurship is a global language, right? I mean, if you look at the statistics, 95 to 100 startups are started every minute in the world.
Wow.
Yeah. Now, what we need to do is do a better job of helping those startups to succeed. That's what the world needs.
Exactly.
Right.
So that's actually part of our focus, and you know, now working with ArabNet, we want to open this bridge and more communication and more cross communication, because now what's happening also, it's kind of interesting to me, is that a lot of friends in the Valley who have, you know, these startups or companies that are now getting bigger, they come to me and say, hey, you know, how do we expand in the Middle East? You know, we want to now reach the audience. And these are brands, Zendesk, Elance, 99 Design, you know, global brands that are now looking at internet, Twitter, social penetration in the Middle East is going through the roof. And so it's exciting times, and you know, as much as people, you know, say, oh, it's not safe and it's kind of turbulent, I actually am very hopeful that, you know, it's kind of the final frontier, and it's, again, meeting the people there, and you know, I'm sure you've met a ton of them as well. It's really, truly inspirational, and a lot of the entrepreneurs are so passionate, and the energy is so pure. And it's not about, oh, I want to raise money from so and so, I want to do, I want to build something.
They want to change the world.
I want to change the world.
That's right.
And even changing the world for them or their family or their community is what drives them. And I can tell you, you know, hear people ask me like, well, you know, what's the work ethic like and what's this? And I can tell you, some of the entrepreneurs there are incredibly passionate and motivated and dedicated.
We'll talk about Hytham, you know, and Kinjin. So two brothers from Port Said, Egypt, you know, basically started this thing out of nothing.
Dropped out of school.
Dropped out of school.
Taught himself how to code.
And they have written a very credible natural language processing search engine, you know, which has been benchmarked against Siri and Wolfram Alpha, and is,
to be,
you know,
almost three times more accurate.
So just think about that. I mean, that is not, you know, lots of people think about emerging markets and they think, well, they make the such and such in the Middle East, you know, the Amazon and the media, right? And that's great business, and there's a lot of people doing really interesting work there, and they should by all means do that, because that market is underserved, particularly in native language, right? So that's cool. But when you find somebody like Hytham and his brother Ashraf, or you find somebody like the guys at Silmines who have, you know, this server board that basically accelerates high-speed financial services transaction processing by a factor of 20x using floating decimal point technology. That is really hardcore technology. And so, yeah, if we can, you know, my feeling, part of the reason I'm involved with this is exactly what you're talking about. If we can bring together folks from other parts of the world and people here, and they look out and we look in, you know, I mean, everybody wins in a situation like that.
And again, I'm very hopeful and positive, and again, we're going to be in Beirut in 10 days, and the conference there last year had 1,000 people, like 1,000 tweets generated. May Cordoba, May Habib from Cordoba, launched there. Now we're working with her on potentially translating Steve Blank's book. I talked to Brian Solis yesterday, translating his book into Arabic.
Great.
So a lot of people, Steve Blank is super fired up. All these people are super fired up, and on the surface, you wouldn't know. I mean, maybe it's not their core focus, but everybody wants to contribute, and everybody sees, that there's this opportunity to help entrepreneurs in the region that are, like you said, underserved and disconnected. So.
Yeah, no, it's great. I mean, Dave McClure is out there. He's made a couple of investments, and other folks are starting to get the word. I think it's going to happen. Look, when the global technology companies refer to these markets, the Middle East, Latin America, Southeast Asia, as the next billion customers, and so they can't ignore anybody who wants to be a global company can't ignore the region. The thing about the region, and I think this is true in a lot of parts of the world, is it really helps to have somebody like yourself who understands it innately, who can translate. So it's not just a bridge; it's a translator.
Well, the funny thing is, I don't speak Arabic, but
it's cultural translation
enough to be able to connect. And again, I've been there 7 times now in the last 9 months, and I've literally met a couple thousand people, and that's from an entrepreneur who saw his best friend get shot in Syria, to the son of the sheikh, and Fadi Ghandour, who's kind of the Dave McClure of the region.
Maybe the Ron Conway.
But he's doing a lot of investments.
Yeah, he is.
He's really pushing.
He's very committed.
Habib with Wamda, and again Omar with ArabNet. There are definitely people who are just like the people we see here, and trying to build something out of something that doesn't exist, and really spur the ecosystem. So I want to applaud you and thank you for your efforts and your involvement, and I'm sure we'll cross our paths.
Meet again soon.
Very soon. Thank you for
Inshallah.
making time. And by the way, first time at South by, so just like the other guests have said, just go with the flow, and you'll probably be pulling in 7,000 directions, but just end up somewhere and mingle and network, and you'll have a...
Or keep running into friends.
Exactly. See? Awesome. Thanks,
Very
Leslie.
nice to see you.
Pleasure to meet you, and thanks for making time.
Thank you.
We'll see you in the next episode. Peace.